Hello there everyone, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Skarsnik of the Greenskins. I went through the initial turns and checked a bit of how the faction plays out, its strengths and weaknesses. In the end I'll give you some army compositions that I would try in my own campaigns, so that you can use or adapt to your playstyle. This is an overview but not an in-depth guide. Without further, let's play with Skarsnik, shall we? For our short victory conditions, we need to destroy the Crooked Moon mutinous Gits, basically in command of Carrot 8 Peaks, Clan Angrund, who is on the race as well, look at it here on the other side of that strait, and Clan Moors, who's really close. They have the most optimal location to try and reach Carrot 8 Peaks, so all of these three factions need to be destroyed. Then we need to, of course, take control of Carrot 8 Peaks. This faction is all about going there, similar to Clan Angrund and Clan Moors. Now, we do also have to occupy, loot, razor, sack 30 different settlements. Achieving this, we'll get a reward of +3 recruitment rank to all armies. Of course, this is always good to ensure your units are better right off the gate, considering that the Greenskins generally lack leadership, and especially Skarsnik, because he can only recruit goblins for a while. It does ensure that they have it just a bit extra, so it helps. Now, this is quite a moderate campaign, as you have one way to go, of course, but you need to destroy two factions. So conquering Carrot 8 Peaks is not the part that would take longer. It's more like destroying Clan Angrund over there, because of course you'll go down here, maybe you can finish off Clan Moors, and then you need to go over here to finish off Clan Angrund, unless they get destroyed by someone else, of course. For the long campaign victory, requires the short victory, of course. Occupy, loot, razor, sack 75 different settlements, and then destroy a bunch of minor Greenskin factions. Now, contrary to other Greenskin lords, you're actually positioned to handle most of them directly. You know, even the ones that are pretty far away, let's say, you know, such as the Broken Nose, for instance, here. Now, plenty of these will be destroyed naturally as the game goes on, you know. But anyone that survives, of course, always remember, you have the Confederation mechanics, so only one battle is actually really necessary to do this. Now, achieving this, global recruitment +2, it is decent to ensure you can get full stacks in the late game or reinforce faster. It is of particular importance for Skarsnik to have access to those, easier access to those orc units. Now, Skarsnik, he has pernicious precision and enjoys these benefits. So, he can only recruit orc units from Carrot 8 Peaks. Up until then, goblins and monsters. That's what he can do. The upkeep and recruitment cost is -40% for goblin units. This is faction-wide, so do note that this will cause the faction to overall get a feel for more goblin units instead of just the orc units, even after you capture Carrot 8 Peaks. Chaotic experience gain +100% to all heroes, so your heroes will always be better, basically. Walk does have a chance to contain Doom Divers, and there's a unique building chain available at Carrot 8 Peaks. I can already explain. This is basically just a building that will allow you better to recruit orc units, but it also allows some buffs. More on that a little bit later. And the hero action cost is -50%. So of course a little bit of a focus there into some heroes with the experience and hero action cost. So build as many as possible to enjoy this faction. Now, climate is good to average. As you'll know, the biggest issue is that you will have some problems if you try to control the whole map. For the most time you can have no issues in getting a grand empire in just, you know, unpleasant to normal climate for you. But if you try to fully dominate the whole map, especially in the new world, you're gonna run into issues. So yeah, be mindful of that. Your starting position is a 3-settlement province with a gold mine, actually. So it is quite useful and it's fairly defensible. Threats from the north will most likely take a little bit of time, so they give you a decent chance to prepare. But always keep an eye on over here, especially against the dwarfs, of course. Now, typical expansion will always be towards the south, always towards Carrot 8 Peaks. After you reach it, then of course you'll a little bit on your own. Now, it's a necessity given the boost that it gives. It doesn't give you too much of a debuff. Not recruiting orc units, you can manage in the early game. The control -2 is kind of negligible. But after you take it, of course, then you can kind of go into a normal greenskin campaign. Okay? After which, even to complete the short victory, either you go towards Clan Angren there, or you try to see if they are destroyed via other means, or you go against Clan Moors. That's pretty self-explanatory. Going towards the north, it's not really recommended. Maybe you can make a case for trying to confederate Azag. That sort of idea, but I wouldn't recommend it, especially in your first playthrough. Just go to Caracade Peaks and that will be it. Diplomatically, you're part of the evil tide. Other greenskins, vampire counts, ogres, some Skaven, not Clan Moors, of course. They will most likely be your friends. Enemies will have all those other factions too. You'll be fighting vampire counts, you'll be fighting greenskins as well, you'll be fighting Skaven. But it will also include anything from the Order Tide, the dwarves, located here, and here, of course. The Empire for certain, Bretonia later on, Wood Elves, etc. All of those factions might come against you, and as you proceed south, of course, the likes of Scarbrand or even etc. will most likely declare war on you. Therefore, outpost ideas will most likely happen with other Skaven factions and some vampire counts, so try to get any good infantry from them, or more missile units, better missile units and artillery, or go into the flyers or cavalry units from the vampire counts. That's the sort of idea that I would go for. In terms of mechanics, let's talk Confederation. It's quite simple for the Greenskins. It can either go via diplomacy as usual, or just beating a rival faction leader in a battle. You'll be prompted to absorb that faction into your own empire if you choose. Of course, that's a massive benefit to choose that one, but you also have other options if you prefer. The war is also a great mechanic. Basically, you keep fighting, keep having battles, and it will fill out this bar. Now, while this is ongoing, you get some debuffs or some nice buffs. So, for instance, in the early ones, of course, you have to avoid this because it's severely impairing you. But as soon as you start fighting a little bit, of course, then you'll get quite some nice buffs, especially that leadership to all armies, which, you know, greenskins do lack. Now, once you start a war, what I'm doing here, you can select a target, and depending on the faction's strength, you get a bigger warg and better results from that. For instance, if I go for this, I'll start, you can dedicate to Morg or to Gorg, depending on whether you want more missile strength for your armies or more weapon strength for your armies. Let's just go for more missile strength. I'll declare on them just for that case. And now you have 20 turns to reach it. Now, basically what this does also is it creates a warg army that accompanies you, and it will replenish with some units, giving the warg having a chance to contain Doom Divers because of Skarsnik. Of course, you can imagine the type of armies that you will have, and this affects every single army. So they'll go up until 19, as you can see here. So if I recruit someone for this guy, then the warg, of course, will have. Let's see if I had anything. No, the warg, of course, will go up to 20, and yeah. Basically, now I would have 4 armies, you know, two armies of up to 40 units to try and conquer that place. And when I finish, I would get this trophy. This is a preview, it's still not there. So completing it, I would get recruitment cost minus 10% faction-wide and leadership plus 10 faction-wide. Now, these bonuses are different considering the type of enemy that you fight. If it would be undead, if it would be greenskins, if it would be dwarfs, it would always be a little bit different. So keep an eye on those different types of trophies, okay? In terms of the other mechanic, which is the scrap mechanic, you get this by a lot of means, most of them looting, raiding, and, you know, fighting out. And what it does is that it allows you a different way to upgrade your units. Let's go for the Night Goblins here. You can use the scrap upgrades, and of course you need some technologies to liberate those, but you can see that this affects different this unit. So you can have armor piercing weapon damage, so you can make them better in armor piercing. You can give them the Night Goblin poison here, so just the Snarski's Skarsnik's, I hate the name, the Death Juice, which also gives damage over time. Okay, so you can give them liquor flasks for more leadership. It's up to you. You spend the amount of scrap, and of course, all your armies will always have. Think of this as giving a trait to every specific unit. You know, you spend that and give a trait, and do note that these are different for each type of unit. So, for instance, Goblin Archers can get heavy ammo, which gives them armor-piercing missile damage, or they can get much more ammunition. Now, for instance, Trolls can get, if not mistaken, they can get leadership, which is their actually weakness, so that would be an idea, or you can give them more weapon strength. It's up to you. Whatever you choose, just make sure that you have a reason for it, specifically for that army. Okay? And finally, just a sort of different, not mechanic in itself, but you do, after you finish a WOG, a successful WOG, you can recruit some units, some specific ones such as Armored Squeak Hoppers, Lava Spider Rider Archers, the Lava Ragnarok Spider, sorry about that, and also the Feral Hydra, Feral Wyvern. So all of these units are really cool to complement your armies already and giving them a little bit more variety. In terms of edicts, they're quite simple and effective. You have a Control, Growth, and Corruption edict. This is pretty much the basic that we'll have sometimes. The recruitment cost and local recruitment capacity one, and also the construction cost and income for all buildings. Sorry, this will be most likely your default for a long time, as it, of course, it pertains to income. We always love that. Now, in terms of army stances, we will have some differences already for those of you who are familiar with the Greenskins. So raiding camp, it's actually their in camp stance basically. They also raid and they gain scrap per turn. They have enabled replenishment, immune to attrition, and at the same time it doesn't cost any movement. So this is more likely to be your default stance at all times. Especially against the Skaven, don't ignore the ambush defense chance, which really helps against the Skaven. Now, of course, this one is really without any costs whatsoever, especially because it doesn't have any movement costs, so it's great addition. It joins the raid with, of course, the encampment. Now, underway is, of course, the tactical one. A mechanic in itself, it will happen particular, given that your start location is in the mountains, so that you can reach out to Caracade Peaks as soon as possible, of course. So yeah, of course it will also cause some underground battles if you're intercepted, so be wary of that. Now, you also have ambush with 25%. Note that with Skarsnik, he also gets some bonuses for that ambush, so make sure that you use it. There's some army positions that you can try even just with Skarsnik because he's so effective at it. And finally, of course, Forced March. Nothing to see there. So as always with the Greenskins, it's not something that you spot immediately, but every single settlement that you have gives you +1 to local recruit capacity within a settlement. So this makes it much easier to have massive armies quickly. There are 6 buildings for Skarsnik, initially at least, for full military, with only 1 that can be built in a minor settlement to the fullest. Now, you'll most likely require a second province to fully build every single military building and still have an income, and the advice would be for that to be Carrick Peaks, of course. Before we go on to that, we do have a barracks that actually allows some missile units and some decent front line, some damage dealer with the nested skulkers, so of course make use of that. Tier 3 units, they're not really that good, but you do get some stone trolls, which is nice. You did get some artillery with the Goblin Rock Lobbers, some form of skirmishing cavalry, really nothing too shabby, of course. Better to use the Night Goblins, Squeak Hoppers for the most part, because they are armor piercing and anti-infantry. But yeah, it's on the tier 4 that you get the big monsters, the Ragnarok Spider, the Giants, the Doom Diver Catapults, and then tier 5 with the Rogue Idols. And of course Caracade Peaks changes a little bit things. Why? Let me show you. Because it does have the Black Orcs, the Orc Big Guns, and of course the Orc Boys and Orc Arrow Boys. It also adds the Orc Boar Big Guns and the Orc Boar Boys and Orc Boar Chariots, so the Orc units are all added here. This is a good spot to have as your secondary military province, especially this building here. I'll go through it right away. It does give some Lord Recruit rank faction-wide leadership plus 20 for goblins and night goblins. That's one of their weaknesses. Suddenly they become much better. And unit experience gain for turn faction-wide. Attrition when under siege just affects the region. But yeah, definitely when you get this, of course, with the global recruitment you can build all the works that you want. Of course they will be a little bit more expensive, but it does open up the possibility. Okay. In terms of infrastructure, so we do have a control and hero recruitment building and lesser corruption, of course. We have a growth and casualty replenishment and an income generated building as well. We also have a campaign movement range, income from post-battle loot faction wide, note that, and some more income and more ambush success chance. So as always, these are fairly circumstantial, but by all means feel free to use those buildings as well. Okay. In terms of research, basically it's one of the best, I would say. It does add a lot of significant advantages for goblin units, even for your initial campaign. So as you can see here, I already went for that instead of just growing and going for orc units. So yeah, you have a lot of upgrades that you can use, and then you have 2 specific legendary lords that you can get, and all of them, they will follow a different style if you choose. Of course, nothing wrong for you building everything the same, but they can build up in a different style, especially this one with the spider units, for instance. Now all the way until the biggest walk here, all the way to some Ragnarok spider upgrades. So yeah, it is also required for you to, as you can see there, to unlock the scrap upgrades for some units. So be mindful of those. If there's something that you really want to unlock, just go and pinpoint, try to focus that research rate and that research as well, so that you can unlock the scrap upgrades and benefit your units. So skills are divided, of course, into Lord specific, the yellow or combat or magic line, the red line or army line, and the blue line, or the campaign one. Now Skarsnik has some nice battle-focused buffs and some nice bonuses for his armies, such as this one, for instance, especially when in ambush, which is great. He also affects a lot of them over here, especially in Subterranean. He's a good ambusher. So it always goes into the heavy ambushing style for Skarsnik. Now Redline is one of the best. It not only how it organizes units, but also in what it does to buff them up. So it buffs everything that is Goblin and Night Goblin, which is great. If you're going to use those units, by all means, that's 3 skill points to benefit from a wide variety of units. Now the blue line does have upkeep reduction, but considering how for Skarsnik specifically he already has a faction-wide buff to reduce the upkeep of goblin units, maybe you can get a different priority for Skarsnik and other lords, of course. But by all means you can also choose to go just into campaign movement range like you see here. The reason why he doesn't have the oh, by the way, he also has the ready and waiting, the battle reinforcement time. But the reason why he doesn't have lightning strike, because Skarsnik actually starts with it. He enables lightning strike battles when reinforcements are present, so by all means. Now, in terms of heroes, you do have several heroes. So the Black Orc Big Boss does give replenishment to Orc units. He has a skill that you can select, you can choose, and gives the replenishment to them. You also have the Hag, which gives replenishment to everyone. Okay, and then you have the Orc Shaman, and you also have the Goblin Big Boss, of course. So basically all of these heroes, you can notice that they are accessible on level 3, which is excellent. Some factions also have some heroes on level 4, so this is excellent. It gives you some nice choices in terms of heroes, okay? And by all means, just figure out which ones you wish to take. I would always try to get some replenishment though. So here we have every single red line skill and the units affected. Because of the division between goblins and orc units, it's really easy to come up with varied unit compositions without spending too many red line skills. Now Skarsnik heavily favors an ambush and goblin, night goblin and squigs, as you can see here. So of course this is especially true of the early game. Combinations of those may be in order, and can upgrade them later on with monsters, of course. Of course, nothing wrong with giving them some orcs later on, but it's up to you, of course. Now, this, for instance, is a more early game template that you can go to. Remember that, for instance, he starts with different units, of course, that you have all the interest in keeping, but for the most part, you know, some ideas for you to try out. Nothing wrong with giving them a monster line with just some missile troops, some fast squigs for getting rid of enemy artillery, for instance, going around, you know, and some giants and arachnid spiders to deal with any single entities. That sort of idea. As always, the caster and the melee hero, or the amount of them, it's up to you. I just like to always include at least one melee hero and one caster hero, or someone to deal with an enemy lord and someone to cast spells, of course. That's a rule of thumb. Notice how effective they are in terms of the red line skills as well. Now, in terms, we then have specific armies, of course, considering the Goblin Great Shaman and Night Goblin War Boss, all of them into goblins, of course, or squig units and night goblins. So yeah, some cheap combinations that can surprise you still with the monster units, or just some cheap with some chariots and some spider rider archers, of course. These will always be a very good complementary sweeper army, as I like to say, but by all means, with all the bonuses from the campaign that you can get, who knows, these armies are actually viable much later on, you know. Notice how effective they are, of course, in red line skills, and no harm or anything by just slowly taking away some of these goblins into more monsters, for instance. Finally, we do have the bread and butter, basically, armies with all of sorts of black orcs, cavalry units, monster units, some good combinations here and there. This is more, for instance, a combination of an ambush style army, perhaps, with just some monster units to quickly get over there, and you still have some doom divers there. As always, it's up to you. These are just some of my suggestions. I've used pretty much nearly every single army that is here in my campaigns as well, with good success, of course. Skarsnik's unique campaign creates difficulties, as you'll have to contend with the different roster for some time, and it does play out a bit different. For the most part, the heavy infantry is replaced with less tanky, less damage dealing ones, at least at the start. You will, however, be able to field a lot of armies even earlier on because of that upkeep reduction in recruitment costs. So it does affect you slightly differently. You have to think a little bit outside of the box in this regard. For the most part, the way is clear. Get to Karak 8 Peaks as soon as possible. Your path to it is about middle of the road, of course, as Clan Moors right down here has a little bit of a better chance to get there first, but of course that is if it was controlled by a human player, which it isn't, of course. Now, once you do reach Karak 8 Peaks, the small downside is that orc units can really only be recruited here. Of course, global recruitment helps, and a focus on Character 8 Peaks as a military recruitment province should allow you to play Skarsnik as a normal Greenskin faction, at least from that point onwards, of course. Now, your army consists of, and this is after capturing Karak 8 Peaks, great damage dealing infantry, good missiles and artillery, great monsters and single entities, good chariots, cheap units in all categories, cheaper even on the Skarsnik, lacks anti-large halberd infantry style, and average cavalry. Now, replenishment is rather average to bad, unless you have a hero assisting, just because of the climate as well. So for the most part, climate is actually what is going to interfere most with it. So time to play with a true ruler of Karak 8 Peaks, Skarsnik of the Greenskins.